looking at notes FF-1 polar points. So your graphs today for plotting polar points, naming polar points will look as follows. So the first circle here generally is of radius 1. The second circle of radius 2, and then if need be, there will be more circles, 3, 4, 5, each of that radii. Okay, now sometimes you'll see it labeled to where the first circle is 2 units. Maybe you're counting by 2 units, 2, 4, 6, etc. Okay, that origin is called your pole. This is your pi over 2 axis, and then this is called your polar axis. The coordinates will be written as follows: r comma theta. So r is the distance, the units from the pole, and theta is your angle of direction. So let's just get to looking at how this will work. So this coordinate here, this blue coordinate, is the coordinate 2 comma pi over 6, or it could also be written as 2 comma negative 11 pi over 6. Okay, this angle here is pi over 6, as you can probably tell, and we are 2 units from the pole. If we're counting the circles, we go 1, 2 circles to get to that point there. So it's 2 comma pi over 6 or 2 comma negative 11 pi over 6, because if we go in this direction, that would be negative 11 pi over 6. Okay, this coordinate here, so when you draw this straight line through the pole, all right, when I draw this through the pole and it backs up to that point, of course the distance from here to here is pi over 6, but instead of positive 2, this is written as negative 2 comma pi over 6. Notice the angle is the same. Or you could also write it negative 2 comma negative 11 pi over 6. So when you're given that negative unit, you find the positive unit and then you draw the line through the pole and you back up to the other side. Okay, therefore, this is really intriguing. Okay, this point here can be written as 2 comma pi over 6, like we talked about, 2 comma negative 11 pi over 6 because of going backwards, or, interestingly, since this point here, if we were to write this as the original point, this could also be considered 2 comma 7 pi over 6. So if you back this point up, this would be negative 2, 7 pi over 6. Or this point here in pink, this could be written as 2 comma negative 5 pi over 6. So if you back that one up, it would be negative 2 comma negative 5 pi over 6. So this point here has many, many different ways to be written as, and we'll talk about that more as we go into the lesson. So plot the polar point, name it 2 more ways. So let's look at number 1. Number 1 is 1 comma pi over 3. So I only drew 1 circle here because this is just distance 1. And then where's angle pi over 3? So pi over 3 is about there. So I'm going to draw my line through. So the point that I'm wanting is this one here. I'm going to draw the line through the pole. Okay, so I've plotted my point. And let's talk about the angles here. So the angle here is pi over 3. It could also be written as, if we go in the negative direction, negative 5 pi over 3. Now I want to talk about this angle. So this angle here is right here. This could be rewritten as 4 pi over 3, this one here. Or if we go in the negative direction, it would be negative 2 pi over 3. So that's going to help me name the other ways to call this coordinate here. So this coordinate is obviously 1 comma pi over 3. It could also be written as positive 1 comma negative 5 pi over 3. But if you choose one of these angles, then you have to make this negative. So you could say negative 1 comma 4 pi over 3, or you could say negative 1 comma negative 2 pi over 3. So I'll just use the 4 pi over 3. But again, I'll go ahead and list both. Or negative 1, negative 2 pi over 3. So any of these 3 would work, but I'll just box these two because all it asked for was 2 more. Uh-oh, looks like I'm running out of purple. Okay, so now let's look at number 2. So in number 2, we have 3 comma negative pi over 6. So notice I've drawn 3 circles here. So the distance is 3, the direction is negative pi over 6. So negative pi over 6 would be about there. Okay, I'll draw my line through the pole. Okay, these angles here are negative pi over 6, of course, that was the given, comma, what if we went in the positive direction? That would have been 11 pi over 6. Let's name these on this side. This would have been 5 pi over 6, or negative 7 pi over 6. So name 2 more points for this point. Well, you could choose 3 comma 11 pi over 6. And then if you want to use the other side, then of course it would be negative 3 comma 5 pi over 6. Or you could have chosen negative 3 negative 7 pi over 6. Either way. Okay, number 3. On number 3, we've got negative 2 4 pi over 3. So notice this is negative. Okay, so what we need to do is find 4 pi over 3. And I'm just going to draw a light pencil mark. So 4 pi, this is 3 pi over 3. So of course this would be 4 pi over 3. That's 4 pi over 3. If that's 4 pi over 3, this is the point 2. Notice the distance is 2. This is the point positive 2, 4 pi over 3. If I want negative 2, 4 pi over 3, I've got to draw this line through the pole. So again, this point right here, the light one in pencil, is positive 2, 4 pi over 3. If I want negative 2, 4 pi over 3, it would be this point right here. Okay, so this point right here has angle pi over 3 and negative 5 pi over 3. While this here has 4 pi over 3 or negative 2 pi over 3. Okay, so the point that we just plotted, this one here, to rename it, I could call this positive 2 comma pi over 3. I could call it, or positive 2 negative 5 pi over 3. Okay, remember, I got this from finding 4 pi over 3 right here, and this was positive 2 4 pi over 3. So then to make it negative 2 4 pi over 3, I backed it up. Okay, so I chose now these two for my other 2 possibilities for naming this point. Okay, so now let's do 3 more and then we will be done. So number 4 is 3 comma negative pi. Okay, so the distance is 3 and we're going negative pi. So negative pi would be here, our distance 3. If we draw our line through the pole, of course it would back us up right here. Okay, so these angles here are negative pi as well as positive pi. These angles here are 0 and 2 pi. So this coordinate was 3 negative pi. Okay. It also could have been 3 pi. 3 pi. Okay, since that angle there. Or we could have used negative 3, one of these over here, comma 0, or negative 3 comma 2 pi, because that would have backed us up here. Oops, I'll box all 3, that's fine. Okay, we really only needed 2, but I gave 3. Okay, next example, 0, 3 pi over 2. Well, 3 pi over 2 is here, but the distance is 0. So since we're going no distance, the point is just going to land on the pole. So when that's the case, when we have a 0 here, then we can name these coordinates with any angle, because we're not going any distance. We're not really producing an angle, so we can say 0 pi, we can say 0 53 pi. It doesn't matter what we pick as long as it's in radian measure. If you've got a 0 here, you're not going anywhere, you're just staying on the pole. Okay, last example. -6, -5 pi over 4. Okay, so let's find 6, -5 pi over 4, and then we'll therefore find -6, -5 pi over 4. So lightly with the pencil, anytime I'm dealing with that negative, let's find, negative here, -5 pi over 4. Okay, so this is -4 pi over 4, so this is -5 pi over 4. But this is +6, -5 pi over 4. Okay, so we want -6. So this is +6, -5 pi over 4. So this right here would be -6, -5 pi over 4. So what's the angle here? So if you go in the positive direction, okay, the angle here would be 7 pi over 4. Or if you go in the negative direction, -pi over 4. Okay, the angles here, not that we really need them because it's just easier to use these, but we'll go ahead and label them this time. The angles here are 3 pi over 4 or -5 pi over 4. So if we're going to use the positive direction for this point here, we could say this is the same as the point 6, 7 pi over 4, or we could even say 6, -pi over 4, and then we could also say it is -6, we already used -5 pi over 4, so 3 pi over 4. Any of these would work, and I'll just box the 2.